I want you to stop what you're doing right now, because what I'm about to tell you, most priests won't say from the pulpit. Most theologians won't touch it in their books. And most Catholics have gone their entire lives without anyone sitting them down and explaining what is actually happening in the invisible world around them. We talk about angels abstractly. We treat them like a kind of spiritual decoration, nice to believe in, harmless to mention, something to put on a Christmas card. But I'm telling you right now, as a priest who has spent decades in the ministry of exorcism, who has sat across from demonic entities and spoken to them directly, who has witnessed with my own eyes what happens when the supernatural meets the physical world, angels are not decorations. They are warriors. They are messengers. They are guardians assigned by Almighty God to specific people, specific families, and yes, specific houses. And here is what no one tells you. When angels are present in a home, they leave signs. Not signs like visions or apparitions, though those things do happen. I mean quiet, ordinary, easy to miss signs that most people either explain away or simply never connect to their spiritual reality. Well, I have sat with hundreds of families over the course of my priesthood. Families in crisis. Families under spiritual attack. Families who had no idea that the reason their home felt the way it did, calm, ordered, unusually peaceful in the middle of chaos, was because of the angelic presence God had stationed there. Today, I'm going to walk you through 3 of those signs. Pay attention. Take notes if you have to, because by the end of this, you're going to see your home and your spiritual life completely differently. Let us begin the theology of angelic presence. What scripture and tradition actually teach? Before I give you the 3 signs, you need to understand something foundational. Because in our age of sentimentality, we have completely lost the Catholic theological understanding of what angels are and what they do. People imagine angels as beings of pure comfort, soft, gentle, luminous creatures who float around making people feel warm. That image comes from bad art and worse catechesis. The Church's actual teaching, drawn from sacred scripture, the fathers of the Church, and the great scholastic theologians, especially St. Thomas Aquinas, paints a very different picture. Angels are pure intellects. They are immaterial substances of enormous power, intelligence, and speed. When the angel Gabriel appeared to Daniel, the prophet, one of the holiest men who ever lived, fell on his face as though dead. When the angel appeared to the shepherds at the Nativity, the first words out of his mouth were, "Fear not," because the natural human response to encountering an angel is terror, not comfort, terror. This matters because we need to understand that angelic presence in a home is not a passive thing. It is active. It is purposeful. When it has effects on the physical and psychological environment of a dwelling. St. Thomas teaches us in the Summa Theologiae that angels operate on the physical world through the application of their intellectual power to material things. They can move bodies, influence atmospheric conditions, affect the sensory perceptions of human beings, and interact with the material world in ways that are real but often subtle. This is not magic. This is the natural operation of a higher created being interacting with a lower order of creation now. The Church also teaches that every baptized Catholic has a guardian angel, a specific angelic person assigned by God at birth to accompany that soul through life, guide it towards salvation, and protect it from spiritual and even physical harm. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 336, states, "From its beginning until death, human life is surrounded by their watchful care and intercession." But here is what most people don't think about. When multiple people who are in a state of grace or striving toward it live together under one roof, their guardian angels are also present in that home together. And when a family is consecrated to the holy angels, when they pray the rosary regularly, when they have their home blessed by a priest, when they keep sacramentals properly, blessed medals, crucifixes, holy water, they are, in the theological sense, inviting and strengthening angelic presence in their home. I've spoken to demonic entities during exorcisms who have, under compulsion, confirmed that certain homes are essentially impenetrable to their direct influence. Not because of any power of the family themselves, but because of the angelic garrison God has placed there in response to the family's fidelity and prayer. And when that angelic presence is strong, when the angels are, as it were, actively stationed in a home, there are effects, observable effects, things the family notices, often without understanding what they're seeing. Now, some people, when I say this, immediately think I'm talking about visions or interior locutions or mystical experiences. I am not. The saints who received those graces were extraordinary. Most of us live ordinary lives. Most of us will never see an angel with our physical eyes. But that does not mean we cannot discern their presence by the effects they produce, because, as Aquinas teaches, we know causes by their effects. Think about how we know the wind is blowing. We don't see the wind itself. We see the leaves move. We feel the pressure change. We see the dust rise from the road. The wind is invisible, but its effects are absolutely real and absolutely observable. Angelic presence in a home works the same way. And I want to give you one more theological point before we get to the signs, because it has enormous practical consequences. The level of angelic activity in a home is not static. It responds, it grows in proportion to the spiritual condition of the people in the home. When a family increases in virtue, increases in prayer, increases in the sacramental life of the church, the angelic presence in their home intensifies. Conversely, when sin increases, when pride and division and impurity enter a home, the angelic presence can withdraw, not permanently, not completely, but it can be diminished. This is why the condition of a home spiritually is not just a matter of personal piety. It affects the entire invisible ecology of the dwelling. Every rosary prayed in that house matters. Every Mass attended, every sacrament received, or every act of charity performed within those walls. These things build something. They build an environment in which angels can operate more freely, more powerfully, more visibly in their effects. So when I give you these three signs, I want you to hear them not just as things to look for, but as fruits of a life being lived well before God. Because if you're seeing these signs, it means you or someone in your home is doing something right. And if you're not seeing them, that's not a cause for despair. It's a call to action now. Let us get to the first sign, Sign 1. An unexplained and prustent peace. The first sign that angels are present in your home is this: an unexplained and persistent peace that does not correspond to your circumstances. I want to be very precise about what I mean, because peace is one of the most misunderstood concepts in Catholic spiritual life. There are two kinds of peace that people confuse constantly. The first is what I call circumstantial peace, the feeling of calm and contentment that comes when everything in your life is going well. No problems, no conflict, no financial pressure, no illness. Everyone's happy. The house is quiet. That kind of peace is perfectly natural. It doesn't require any supernatural explanation. The second kind of peace is radically different. This is the peace that St. Paul describes in his letter to the Philippians. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding. This is a peace that coexists with suffering. A peace that is present in spite of difficulty, not because of the absence of difficulty. When angels are actively present in a home, this is the kind of peace they carry with them. Because peace is one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit, and the holy angels are instruments of the Holy Spirit's action in the world. I have been in homes. I am thinking of specific families right now where the husband was out of work, the wife was dealing with a serious illness, one of the children was going through a spiritual crisis, and the financial situation was objectively dire. And yet when you walked through the door of that home, there was something there. A quality in the air, a settledness, well, a quietness that had nothing to do with the noise level and everything to do with something invisible. Other family members noticed it. Visitors noticed it. People who came to that home in states of agitation left feeling strangely calmer than when they arrived, and they couldn't explain why. That is not coincidence. That is angelic operation. Now, I want to be careful here because I am not a sentimentalist, and I will not let you become one on my watch. Not every feeling of peace in a house is supernatural. And you should not run around telling everyone that your good mood means you have angels. What I am describing is something qualitatively different from ordinary emotional states. It is persistent. It is disproportionate to circumstances. And it tends to be noticed by others, not just by the people who live there. There is also a theological dimension here that I want you to understand. The angels do not produce this peace on their own authority. They are ministers of God's peace. They communicate it the way a pipe communicates water. The source is God. The angelic presence is the channel, and the channel is opened or widened by the spiritual condition of the household. When I have done house blessings, and I have done hundreds, there's almost always a palpable change in the atmosphere of the home afterward when the family is living in a state of grace. People feel it. Children who were agitated become calm. Adults who were anxious feel something lift. That is not psychological suggestion. I have seen it happen in homes where no one even told the children what was happening. They just changed. What should you do with this sign? First, cultivate the conditions that invite it. That means regular rosary in the home. It means keeping your home in a state of sacramental blessing. Have it blessed by a priest. Use holy water regularly. Keep a crucifix in every room and especially above every doorway. These are not superstitions. These are the material anchors for the invisible sacramental reality of your home. Second, protect that peace actively. What I mean is, be ruthless about what you allow into your home through media, through entertainment, through the people you invite in. The enemy will always try to disrupt angelic peace through conflict, through impurity, through noise, through whatever he can get in. Guard the doors of your home the way you would guard the doors of a church. And third, when you notice that peace, name it. Thank God for it. Ask your guardian angel to strengthen and maintain it, because gratitude in the spiritual life is never passive. It is an act of will that cooperates with grace, and it opens you further to receive what God is giving. This leads us directly to the second sign, das Eigen 2. Children and animals behave differently. The second sign is one that I have found to be remarkably consistent across many different families and many different types of households. When angels are present, children and animals respond to the invisible reality in ways that adults typically cannot. This is not merely anecdote. This has a solid theological and philosophical basis that I want to lay out for you. St. Thomas Aquinas, following Aristotle, teaches that human beings are rational animals. We have intellect and will, but we also have a sensitive faculty, what the scholastics call the sensory appetite. In adults, this sensory faculty is almost entirely governed, sometimes overpowered, by reason, habit, convention, and the constant noise of intellectual activity. We have been so trained to explain, categorize, and rationalize our perceptions that we often screen out what our senses are actually picking up. Children have not yet developed this filtering mechanism fully. Their sensitive faculties are more open, more reactive, more immediately responsive to environmental stimuli, including stimuli that adults have learned to ignore. This is why children often sense things before adults do. It is not mysticism. It is developmental neuroscience aligning perfectly with Thomistic anthropology. Animals are similar, but for a different reason. Animals have no rational intellect. They operate entirely through their sensitive faculties and their instincts. And their sensitive faculties are, in many respects, considerably more acute than ours. We all know that dogs can hear frequencies we cannot, smell things we cannot detect, sense weather changes before they occur. What is less commonly understood is that animals also appear to be sensitive to certain kinds of spiritual presence, particularly demonic presence, which oft causes animals to become agitated, fearful, or aggressive without any visible cause. The inverse is also true. In homes where strong angelic presence exists, animals tend to be unusually calm. Dogs that are normally anxious become quiet and peaceful. Where cats that are typically skittish become relaxed. I have heard this from too many families in too many different contexts to dismiss it as coincidence. And children, particularly young children between the ages of roughly 2 and 6, before their rational faculty is fully developed, sometimes do things that cannot be explained in purely natural terms. I will give you an example. I know a family, devout Catholics, rosary every evening, home blessed, First Fridays observed, whose 3-year-old daughter began doing something strange. We're at a particular spot in the living room, always the same spot. She would stop, look up at a point near the ceiling, and smile. Not laugh, not play. Just smile. And then go back to what she was doing. The parents asked her what she was looking at. She said, very simply, the pretty man. Now, I am not telling you that every child who smiles at the ceiling is seeing their guardian angel. I am a trained exorcist, and I approach these things with extreme caution. Children have imaginations. They say things. You do not build a theology on a toddler's comments. But I will tell you this. When that pattern is consistent, when it corresponds to a home that is genuinely ordered toward God, when it is accompanied by other signs, it is worth taking seriously and worth bringing to a priest. Beyond visual responses, there are behavioral ones. In homes with strong angelic presence, children often display an unusual capacity for stillness during prayer. They may be wild and chaotic in every other context, which is developmentally normal. But when the rosary is prayed, or when they are in front of the Blessed Sacrament, something in them quiets. That is not natural. Children this age are not naturally still. Something is working on them from the outside. I want to also address something that is often misunderstood in this context. The reaction of children and animals is not evidence that the angelic presence is visible. The angels are not necessarily appearing to these children in any visionary sense. What is more likely happening is that the children and animals are responding to the effects of angelic presence, the peace, the order, the quality of the environment, at a level of sensitivity that adults have lost. This has direct implications for your family life. If you want your children to grow up with a sensitivity to the supernatural, which is a tremendous spiritual gift and a powerful protection against the corruption of the world, you must create the conditions for it. That means a home ordered toward God. That means the rosary. That means sacramental life. That means limiting the noise and the chaos and the electronic stimulation that desensitizes children to everything subtle and practically. Pay attention to your children's responses to certain places in your home, to certain times of prayer, to certain moments of peace. Not in an obsessive way, not in a way that manufactures things that aren't there, but with the attentiveness of a parent who understands that their children's souls are living in a real spiritual environment. And that environment has effects. When children flourish in a home, not just physically, not just emotionally, but spiritually, when they move naturally toward prayer, when they ask questions about God without being pushed, when they demonstrate a natural reverence in the presence of sacred things, that is almost always a sign that something good is operating in the invisible dimension of that household. Now to the third sign, which is perhaps the most important of all, Jan 3. Evil cannot get a foothold. The third sign is this. In a home where angels are strongly present, evil has a demonstrably difficult time gaining traction. This sign is in some ways the most theologically substantive of the three, because it gets to the function of angelic presence rather than simply its atmosphere. And it is the one that I have seen play out most dramatically in my work as an exorcist. Let me explain what I mean by evil gaining traction, because I want to be precise. I am not primarily talking about what Hollywood calls demonic activity, objects moving, doors slamming, voices in the dark. Those things can happen, and I have witnessed them, but they are actually relatively rare compared to the far more common and far more dangerous forms of evil that assault families. The evil I am talking about is division between spouses, chronic, inexplicable anger in a home, children who turn against their parents and against their faith with a bitterness that seems disproportionate to any natural cause. Addictions that spiral with unusual speed and intensity. Pornography that enters a home and metastasizes. Despair that descends with a weight that defies rational explanation. Financial disasters that seem to arrive in waves, each one cresting before the last has receded. These are the ordinary operations of demonic influence in family life. They are not spectacular. They are grinding, they are slow, and they are devastatingly effective, precisely because most families never recognize them for what they are. Now, here is the key point. In homes where angels are strongly present, these attacks still come because the enemy never stops, but they do not stick. They do not gain the purchase they would in a spiritually disordered home. Why, I have spoken with demonic entities under the authority of the church, and what they have confirmed under compulsion against their will is that certain homes represent a kind of fortified position that is extraordinarily difficult to penetrate. Not because of any natural quality of the people in those homes, but because of the angelic garrison that God has placed there. Saint Michael the Archangel, in Catholic tradition, is not merely a devotional figure. He is the captain of the angelic armies, the one who cast Lucifer out of heaven, the one to whom the church gives the title defender against the wickedness and snares of the devil. When families invoke Saint Michael, specifically and regularly, with the prayer given to us by Pope Leo XIII, they are not engaging in a superstitious ritual. They are doing something with real spiritual and theological weight. They are invoking the direct assistance of the angelic general against the forces arrayed against their home. And you can see the difference in families who do this versus those who don't. A family that prays the St. Michael prayer daily, that prays the rosary together, that goes to confession regularly, that keeps their home in a state of sacramental blessing, that family, when the enemy attacks, tends to recover quickly. The division doesn't fester. The temptation doesn't compound. The attack lands, but it doesn't destroy. It's like the difference between a punch that hits a man in peak physical condition versus the same punch hitting a man who hasn't slept in a week and hasn't eaten in 3 days. Grace is the spiritual immune system. And the angels are, in a very real sense, the white blood cells. But there's an important qualification I need to make. The absence of visible evil in a home is not by itself proof of angelic presence. A home can be quiet because everyone in it is spiritually anesthetized, because they've made peace with sin, because no one is striving for anything, because the enemy has no need to attack what he already controls. That is a false peace. And it is far more dangerous than the peace I described in the first sign, because it looks the same from the outside, but is its exact spiritual opposite. The sign I'm describing is different. It is, attacks come, and they are turned back. The family goes through real trials, real suffering, real conflict, real temptation, but they survive them with their faith intact, their charity stronger, their unity deepened. That pattern, sustained over years and decades, is one of the most reliable indicators of genuine angelic protection. How do you cultivate this? The answer, as with all things in the spiritual life, is deceptively simple and requires enormous discipline. You must fight for the sacramental life of your household. Every Catholic in that home needs to be going to confession regularly, monthly at minimum, or frequently if they are in spiritual combat. The sacrament of confession is not merely an administrative cleansing, it is an act of spiritual warfare. Every time a soul goes to confession in your home, the angelic position in that home is strengthened. You must pray with spiritual authority over your home. Not in a charismatic or theatrical way, in a Catholic way. Bless your home with holy water regularly. Invoke Saint Michael by name. Say the rosary as a family. These are not optional extras for the extraordinarily devout. These are the ordinary means by which ordinary Catholic families maintain the spiritual integrity of their homes, and you must be ruthless about not letting the enemy in through the doors you control. What comes through your screens matters. What comes through your relationships matters. What you bring into your home in terms of objects, media, and influences, it all matters. Home is not just a physical structure, it is a spiritual environment. And you are responsible for it. If you do these things over time, you will begin to notice that attacks still come, but they lose their power. They bounce off. And eventually, you will recognize that you are not alone in your defense. Well, you have allies in the invisible world who are fighting for your home with a ferocity and intelligence that makes your own efforts look modest. That is the angelic presence you are building toward. How to invite and strengthen angelic presence in your home? Practical and theological guide, we have identified the 3 signs. Now I want to give you something equally important, a concrete, practical, theologically grounded path for inviting and strengthening angelic presence in your home. Because recognizing the signs is one thing, but building toward them, living in such a way that angels are not merely passing through your home, but stationed there, that requires deliberate action. I want to organize this around 3 categories. The sacramental, the devotional, and the moral. The sacramental, everything in the spiritual life flows from the sacraments. This is not an optional spiritual preference. It is the architecture of Catholic spiritual reality. The sacraments are the primary means by which grace enters the world, and grace is the environment in which angelic activity flourishes. The most foundational sacramental act you can perform for your home is to have it formally blessed by a priest. Not a casual blessing, a full house blessing, using the rites of the church. This creates a sacramental reality in your home. It places it under the protection of God through the authority of holy orders. Well, a properly blessed home is, in theological terms, a different kind of space than an unblessed one. Not in a magical sense, but in the sense that the church's blessing invokes a real divine response. After the house blessing, the daily sacramental practices begin. Holy water, real holy water, blessed by a priest, should be present at every entrance to your home. Use it when you enter and when you leave. Bless yourself and your children with it. Sprinkle it in the rooms of your home, especially during times of tension or conflict or fear. This is not superstition. It is the correct use of a sacramental that the Church has provided specifically for this purpose. Crucifixes, not just crosses, crucifixes, should be on the walls of your home, above the main door, above the beds of your children, in the main gathering space of the family. The crucifix is not decoration. It is a statement of territorial authority. This home belongs to Jesus Christ, who purchased it with his precious blood. The devotional, the rosary, is the single most powerful devotional instrument available to a Catholic family. And I say this not as a pious opinion, but as a man who has stood in rooms where demonic entities have reacted to the rosary being prayed with something that looked very much like physical pain. The family rosary should be non-negotiable. It does not need to be perfectly prayed. The children do not need to be perfectly still. It can be messy and imperfect and full of distractions. Pray it anyway. The accumulation of rosaries prayed in a home builds something spiritually, invisibly, but really, that I can only describe as a fortification. The St. Michael prayer should be prayed daily by every adult in the home. The version given to us by Pope Leo XIII in its short form is sufficient, but pray it with intention, not merely as words. You are invoking a specific angelic person for a specific purpose. Address him as a person because he is one. Consecrate your family to your guardian angels. Ask God to allow your guardian angels to work together for the sanctification of your home. This is a form of angelic cooperation that the church's tradition fully supports and that has real effects. And cultivate a devotion to the Holy Family, to Saint Joseph in particular, as the patron and guardian of the universal church and the protector of families. Where Saint Joseph is honored, the enemy has difficulty operating. I have seen this too many times to doubt it. The moral of this is the category most people want to skip because it requires the most from us. But it is arguably the most important. The moral condition of the people in a home determines, more than anything else, the degree of angelic presence that can operate there. Because God does not force his gifts on those who have chosen sin. The angels are not withheld as punishment, but they are, in a very real sense, limited in what they can do in an environment saturated with serious unrepented sin. This means confession must be regular. Every adult in that home should be going to confession at least once a month. Or if serious sin enters the home, mortal sin, it should be confessed as soon as possible. This is not legalism. It is spiritual hygiene. It means impurity must be kept out. Or pornography is probably the single most destructive spiritual force in the modern Catholic home. It is not merely a moral failing. Well, it is an opening, a point of entry for demonic influence that is extraordinarily difficult to close while the habit persists. If pornography is present in your home, the spiritual environment of that home is compromised in ways that affect everyone in it, not just the person using it. This must be addressed in confession and with the help of a spiritual director. It means conflict must be resolved, not suppressed. Chronic unresolved anger between spouses, between parents and children, between siblings. This is exactly the kind of disorder the enemy cultivates. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Low-grade, ongoing resentment, bitterness, contempt. These things suppress angelic activity as surely as mortal sin because they directly contradict the charity that the angels serve. The moral work of a family is the substrate on which everything else is built. Sacramentals and devotions build on it, but they cannot substitute for it. If you do these three things, the sacramental, the devotional, the moral, consistently, over time, without quitting when it gets hard, you will build a home that the angels want to be in. A home that God has reason to fill with his messengers and guardians. And then the signs I described will follow naturally. The final word, what is at stake in the call to action? I want to speak to you very directly in this final section because I think there is something that needs to be said plainly without softening. We are not living in normal times. I have been a priest for decades. I have worked in exorcism for most of my priesthood. And I can tell you with the weight of long experience that what I am seeing in the spiritual landscape of Catholic families right now is unlike anything I have seen before. The rate of demonic activity, formal possession, obsession, oppression, infestation has increased dramatically in frequency, in severity. In the age of the people affected, I am seeing cases now that 20 years ago would have been exceptional. They are no longer exceptional. The reason is not mysterious. When a society systematically dismantles everything that builds spiritual resilience, the family, the sacraments, reverence, prayer, the moral life, and replaces it with everything that weakens spiritual resilience. Sexual chaos, self-worship, the occult dressed up as entertainment, technology that destroys attention and silence. The result is spiritually vulnerable people. And spiritually vulnerable people are spiritually exploitable people. The enemy does not need a dramatic invitation. He does not need someone to draw a pentagram or chant an incantation. All he needs is a soul that has moved away from God through indifference, through habitual unconfessed sin, through the slow substitution of the world for the supernatural, and an environment, a home, that has been emptied of the sacramental and the devotional. When the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places seeking rest and finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. This is not a parable about demonic possession specifically. It is a warning about spiritual emptiness. A home, a soul that is swept clean of sin but has nothing positive to fill it is more vulnerable than one that never tried at all. This is why the 3 signs I have given you today are not merely diagnostic. They are not just things to look for. They are targets. They are the description